Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I have the absolute honor and privilege of introducing Peter Lyngdorf to Zebra Spotlight. Peter Lyngdorf, as you know, is the innovator for digital room correction, and he's been extensively involved in innovating and developing new technologies in the hi-fi industry for many, many years, and continues to lead a very vibrant research and development facility at Steinway Lyngdorf in Skive. But I'm going to let Peter introduce more about himself because he can do it a lot more extensively and in more detail than me. Peter, welcome.
Thank you very much.
Now, if for the audience, I think it's interesting and important for them to learn a little bit about your background before knowing what you currently do and what you currently represent. Let's take it all the way back and just tell us about your academic journey, about your engineering journey, and then how you ended up doing what you're doing.
Well, my academia is short because I did go to high school, but during high school I was making loudspeakers and I wasn't attending class. I had the lowest grades in the history of the school. I was focusing on making loudspeakers for my friends and having hi-fi as a hobby, making recordings with the tape recorder and stuff like that, helping bands with sound on their when they play the gigs and so on. So I got out of high school when I was 19, and I took first a job in marketing for about 3 weeks, and then I worked a little bit with shipping, also about 3 weeks, and then I started my own company, importing hi-fi products, primarily from England. And at the same time, I was making loudspeakers for my friends and so on. So I never had a formal education. How did I end up here? I was always very interested in the basics of sound and you know how we experience sound and how we perceive sound and what makes a difference in a cabinet design, speaker design, and so on. Through the years, I started to get a lot of very good friends who were interested in good sound. I started my import business, and that grew quite nicely because one of the first real big product I had was Cerwin Vega loudspeakers from the USA. And that was at the time when they were making the speakers for the earthquake movies and disaster movies and so on, where they could make this giant rumble that would scare the heck out of all moviegoers. It would actually only be 2 different kinds of sounds that would be electronically generated. Anyway, it was fun. So Cerwin Vega was my first encounter with a company where I learned a little bit more about the company. And I became very good friends with the founder and the owner of Cerwin Vega. And although he made rock and roll speakers, he was a brilliant engineer and had a lot of good discussions with him. And then very early on, I got involved with NAD Electronics. Shortly after they founded the company, and I started importing NAD to Denmark, and I started selling NAD to the engineers at Brüel & Kjær, the measurement technology company in Denmark. At that time, that was a company the size of Bang & Olufsen, or a little bit bigger, but only making super sophisticated measurement equipment primarily for acoustics. So they bought all NAD products from me and helped generate a reputation for NAD as being the best sound you could get for the bucks. And as a NAD distributor, I became involved with the product development team. So we had a small group of people who came with inputs for the amplifiers and all the products that NAD were designing at that time. At that time, honestly, NAD just bought products from Japan and made them sound a bit better. It was only after a year or so that they hired the first real scientifically based engineer, Björn Erik Edwardson, who then became a very good friend. And Eric and I had a lot of good conversations about audio and so on. And his first product was going to be an amplifier. And we sat down a few people, Peter Treibman from the US and Martin Eriksson from Sweden and myself and Eric and Marty Boris, the CEO of NAD. And of course, everybody had some inputs. My input to what we should do with an amplifier was based on my experience with how Japanese products sounded at that time, which was feeble, no power, fabulous specifications. And then I found out that the Japanese, when they measured an amplifier, they would do a lot of work on making a very, very perfect resistor that was so perfect that they could measure even lower distortion from the amplifiers. And I asked a dumb question, but aren't we supposed to drive loudspeakers, not resistors? And everybody agreed, yes, it's probably a good idea to design an amplifier that is behaving very well with the loudspeaker, which is a much different animal than a resistor. So that was one of the bases for the NAD amplifier. And on top of that, we decided to work with an actual cartridge also instead of a dummy load. So we just asked for a real world product that would drive an actual loudspeaker with an actual pickup cartridge and sound bloody good and have the current, the voltage, everything to drive the speakers perfectly. And that became the NAD 3020, which ended up being the best-selling amplifier in the world. 20 watts per channel, and it was beating the crap out of all the Japanese 100-watt amplifiers because it was designed to drive loudspeakers. So that was actually my first foray into asking dumb questions, such as, why don't we design an amplifier to drive a loudspeaker?
Wow.
It
So
was almost unheard of at the time.
So really, it's a journey of passion, of discovery, experimentation, challenge, and making really good friends with the right people along the way, and you continue down this path.
Yeah.
And then yes, and then continue that. And then what happened during that journey?
Well, during all of this, I was selling more and more product in Denmark. And in 1980, I started Hi-Fi Club, my retail business, simply because I was frustrated about the way the normal hi-fi dealers at that time were selling products. It was only based on the profit margins they could get, and they were always making fake sale, 50% off this month, 40% off the other next month, and so on, fake pricing, fake discounts, and so on. So I was fed up with that and started my own business in selling hi-fi. And that was spreading out to Norway, Sweden, and became very, very successful very quickly. So I could afford to actually buy more and more of the shares of NAD Electronics. Whenever they needed more money, I bought some of the shares, and I started the Dali loudspeaker company in 1983 because I had this passion about making loudspeakers. And I knew that we had some fantastic talent in Denmark because the loudspeaker basically was invented in Denmark. So, so a lot of the core technology in audio was coming out of Denmark. The best measurement equipment, the best microphones, the best speaker driver technology, everything was from Denmark at that time. A little bit from Norway, but it was basically from Denmark. So I thought we can make loudspeakers that are especially suited for my own retail business. because I knew I only hire super enthusiastic people who have the heart in the right place, and that is with the music and good sound. So that was why I started Dali, and that became a pretty nice success rather quickly. And of course, now it's one of the major companies in Europe. But it also gave me insight into what happens when people get loudspeakers into their own living environment. And I was kind of shocked that whenever I visited somebody who had bought nice amplifiers, nice loudspeakers and everything from us, they were kind of not getting the results that I had been expecting. So at the same time, I was creeping in on NAD, so to speak, buying more and more of the shares and sitting quite solidly on NAD, because whenever they needed money, I had made enough in my hi-fi business. So we were starting actually to discuss the potential of doing digital room compensation technology already back in the NAD days. And it was fascinating to talk about what would become possible one day when we had enough data power. Already at that time, we knew about Moore's law, and it's going to expand very quickly with digital technology. So I was always searching for options to start into that venture. And then in 1989, I bought half of Snell Acoustics. And there I started talking with Kevin Wakes about digital room compensation. And we were then looking for some engineer who could do all the digital mathematics and so on to do actual equalization, which it basically is, but at a much more accurate level. And we finally found a guy from a very brilliant engineer who could do all the math and the DSP programming and all of that. And in 1993, Snell Acoustics brought out the world's first full-range digital room compensation system. And of course, that was very early, and the product had so many DSPs that it never became a 100% reliable product because it was way ahead of its time. But except for the reliability problems, it actually did more or less exactly what you see everybody's doing today. You make a frequency response measurement in your listening position, maybe a little bit around your listening position, maybe with some smoothing between measurements and stuff like that. And then we invert the response overlaid with a target curve, and you can get the response you want in your listening position. Actually, the term target curve was my invention. Because in the beginning, we just had like a table, like a spreadsheet with 20 hertz at this level. So I said, why don't we just make a curve out of that? That was my little contribution for that. So I was doing all the listening tests for this correction system, and it was let's say it was frustrating because every time we did something that looked better, when we did a test measurement in the listening position, it didn't sound better, and we were trying this and that and everything, and we corrected for some of the obvious problems in such a system, like you cannot compensate for cancellation, you can only compensate for too much energy and things like that. But it was from 1993 until 2003, we were fighting with this system, and theoretically it looked so damn good. when we verified, our correction, it was perfect. It was virtually perfect. But it didn't sound right. And I couldn't get my head around why it did not sound right. And it was then actually at a conference in Germany where I had to talk about digital room compensation technology versus a professor, a very intelligent guy in Germany who had done a computer program to find the best possible placement of the loudspeaker in a room based on the room dimensions, materials, and everything like that, to give you virtually a perfect frequency response in your listening position. It was actually a brilliant piece of programming. It took like a whole night to calculate where you had to put your speakers. Of course, where you had to put your speakers would be a place where your wife would say, "Are you a freaking maniac, idiot? What? If you want to put your speakers in such a place, you need to find another place to live." Because it was totally impractical. But the reality of that was that it worked. You could actually get virtually flat frequency response in your listening position. And I had taken a totally different approach already. At that time, I said, I want to use corner woofers if I have the option, boundary speakers if I have the option, or dipole speakers, because I don't want to have an omnidirectional speaker standing in the middle of the room, because the bass will go everywhere else than to your noble parts before, it'll go everywhere else. And you get a tiny little bit of energy in the first go, and then you get all the reflections in the bass at a later date. So I already figured out I was that far at that time. So boundary placement and so on, or dipoles could work in a room without getting too much delay from the room itself, or what you in technical terms call excess phase, which sounds sophisticated. It's not sophisticated. Excess phase is all the energy that has been somewhere else before it arrives to your ears. So that's the excess phase of a room. And I said, we have to minimize that, because I want one portion of energy. I want one slam from a kick drum, not 25 echoes from the walls and so on. But anyway, this professor, he was a professor and doctor. He had done something that really would create the same flat frequency response. And we created the flat frequency response after we had placed the speaker properly, because then we had as much of the signal as possible directly to your listening position. And we were then compensating for the frequency response. So we ended up with the same frequency response, but with a totally different sound. The sound of the optimally placed loudspeaker was mellow, undramatic, wishy-washy, no punch, no guts, no slam, no bang. But a beautifully flat response. So all the demos this gentleman made for his system was with organ music, church music, very slow, melodic music. Nothing with a drum, because it would be totally time destroyed. And then I was arguing about what I had done, and he was arguing about what he had done. And then he said something that woke me up. He said, "Yes, but Mr. Lyngdorf, in signal theory," he was German, so I have to do a little bit of a German accent. In signal theory, when you have the best possible frequency response, when you have a flat frequency response, you also have the best possible time response. And then I said, bloody hell no, absolutely not. Absolutely not. You are actually achieving the worst possible time response because the fact that you end up with a flat frequency response is a bloody utter coincidence of all the different reflections coming at all different kinds of time to that microphone. But that's not what we're hearing. And after that, I went back to our engineers and said, guys, forget about what we've been doing. We have to start from scratch because we've been barking up totally the wrong tree. Because the fact that you end up measuring a good frequency response is a coincidence based on so many things. What really matters is what we are hearing. So we scrapped everything I'd been working on for 10 years.
Wow.
I'd been spending probably 500 hours a year listening, testing, another program, another variation. And then I hired within, let's say, 5-6 months, I hired 30 engineers. I took the chief engineers, DSP engineer from Bang & Olufsen, chief engineer for TC Electronics. I got all the best engineers in Scandinavia to work on creating a better correction system. And it was one of the engineers there, Jan Abelgaard Petersen, who came to me one day and said, Peter, I think I have the idea of how to do it. And then he started to explain to me, and I thought he was bonkers. I thought he was crazy. Until I slept on it and found out, bloody hell, he's right. He's right. He's probably right. This is what we have to do. I was skeptical and so on. But he came with the fundamental ideas of RoomPerfect. It wasn't perfect in the first go, but when I then heard the first system being RoomPerfected with RoomPerfect, my first reaction was, but this does not change much. It doesn't change as radically different as everything we've done before. And then I realized that's a damn good thing, because what it corrects for is the anomalies of the room. It doesn't change the way the speaker sounds. So when you turn on RoomPerfect, you say, wow, did not do much. But when you take it off again, you realize, whoa, there's a lot of things that was wrong with your room, but it doesn't sound funny in any way, shape, or form. And that is because the approach to doing compensation is completely different than all the other systems. And we're never chasing this frequency response, because the frequency response, a good frequency response in your listening position is a total coincidence, except for the bass maybe. Because what you hear is coming at different times. But what the microphone picks up is everything that comes at different times. But it's picked up in one go with the microphone. So the experience of a single microphone is totally different than the experience you have when you listen. And that's a very complicated thing to it's not something I can explain except if I have a big whiteboard and a few hours. But that was RoomPerfect. That was how we got over to RoomPerfect.
Now, I mean, the story and how you came to it sounds like the script for Oppenheimer. If you just substituted, instead of looking at atomic energy, looking at sound energy instead. And it's interesting because you were doing this at a time when, as you said, people were selling traditional hi-fi, and I'm guessing that the approach to demonstrating hi-fi and what people were told, this sounds good, as to what you were doing, there must have been attrition. I mean, what did other people at the time think? What were your, say, competitors or other people in traditional hi-fi land saying to you when you were on this endeavor?
Well, reaction from a lot of people, from our customers, reaction was superb.
Mm-hmm.
It was fantastic. Reaction from speaker manufacturers and so on was, oh, but our speakers are so brilliantly designed, they don't need room compensation. Yes, they do. I know from experience. But a lot of speaker designers will say, but I design speakers so that it's not necessary. It will, in 99% of times, it will improve the system dramatically. So reaction from a lot of competitors and so were, yeah, but you know, reaction from our actual customers was interesting because when we made the early correction systems, everybody wanted to modify our amplifiers. They thought that they could modify the power supply. They could modify this to make it sound sweeter, to make it nicer, to make it whatever. They loved the correction system, but they just wanted the amplifier to sound better. Then we took the same amplifier technology, put RoomPerfect in, and nobody ever, to my knowledge, has ever wanted to change the amplifier or change, the power supply or any of the other modifications they were doing. They were not experimenting with speaker cables anymore. They just sat down and listened to music. I hadn't heard about anyone modifying an amplifier when there's RoomPerfect in it.
And I think you made a very important point there is suddenly you start enjoying the music rather than chasing this rabbit hole of tweaks and changes and just wasting a huge amount of time when the music's running away.
Yeah, it's, when I think back to the time before we had RoomPerfect, every time we went to a hi-fi show, that was the time when we still have the CDs. We know RoomPerfect is almost 20 years old now. So we had the CDs, and I would bring 400 CDs for every hi-fi show. We would set up the speakers as good as we could. And then we would start to go through all the hi-fi tracks. And there were a few tracks we knew they would work in any terrible room, Eagles, Hotel California, because there's only one tone in the bass. And that's either too loud or a little bit too soft, but there's only one tone in the bass, right? So you can always play that one. So there was like 10 hi-fi trick tracks that you could play, regardless of how crappy your setup was and how terrible your room interaction was and so on. And then we would find another 5 or 6 or 7 tracks that were really sounding good. But it was a fight, we spent the whole night trying to find those 20 tracks that we could eventually play. After we had RoomPerfect, I would typically just set up the system, do the RoomPerfect, listen to one song, and then I know everything sounds good. All my good music sounds good. I don't have to test another one.
And then sort of moving on from that story, I've always been intrigued to know this story that other people. It's almost like a legend or a tale or something that you read to your kids at bedtime. But I've always wanted to know the story from you, the birth of the Model D system. It's a fascinating story, and I wanted to hear it from you.
Yeah, well, I always loved dipoles out of principle, and we made immediately when I started DALI, we were making a few dipole loudspeakers. Skyline 1000, Skyline 2000. We made Megaline as a dipole, but at that time we couldn't do digital compensation. So to correct for the slope of the bass, which loses power towards lower frequencies, in a dipole, we had to use huge coils and so on. It was not easy, but still there are inherent advantages of a dipole. Also, just the fact that it doesn't radiate to the side; it radiates to the front and to the back. The front radiation is the same as the rear radiation. So you don't have the normal problem of almost any high hi-fi speaker that in front of the speaker, sound is beautiful. On the back of the speaker, the sound is awful. And people think it's not important that the sound behind the speaker is awful because you're sitting in front of the speaker, yeah. But you have a wall behind the speaker. And the reflection from that wall comes out, and it's awful. So then people start to put damping materials and diffusers and all different kinds of things. With a dipole, when you design it properly, you have the same sound on the front and the back. And the Model D, when you listen to it, you can hear it from the front and the back. It doesn't make a difference. It changes the channels, but that's it. It sounds exactly the same. So when you put that speaker into a room, all the reflections sounds like reflections from the instruments. They sound exactly like the direct sound. So regardless of how much reverb you have from the room, it sounds beautiful, it sounds natural. So that's a fundamental advantage of a well-designed dipole loudspeaker. So when I met the people from Steinway, and honestly, I met them because I've been doing the boundary systems with room correction and so on. Because with that technology, we could really reproduce the grunt of a Steinway grand piano. We could get the fundamentals right from a grand piano. And that was one of the friends of Steinway at that time. He actually bought a Lyngdorf system, and he heard that at his home, and he was flabbergasted. He'd never heard a Steinway sound like a Steinway from a hi-fi system. So he called his friends at Steinway and said, "There's this guy in Denmark who makes la 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 la." So I got an invitation to visit Steinway Sons. And I met with the owners and the CEO and the sales management and so on. And they said they were interested in doing expand the scope of the brand with superb audio products, and whether I would be interested in working with them on that. And I said, sure, who doesn't want to work with Steinway and Sons? It's the finest in my vocabulary. It's the finest brand in the world. It has to do with music. It is the finest musical instrument there is. It's the most universal musical instrument. They've been number one in their business for 158 years, with nobody's number two. So they have the finest instruments with music. What could be a better brand? So I always admired Steinway and Sons. So I went over there, we talked, and we had a really good conversation. And I studied Steinway quite a lot before I went over to visit them. And of course, I had already, studied Steinway and Sons because it's interesting. And I realized that Mr. Steinway, when he wanted to make pianos, he was a mechanical engineer. He was an outstanding mechanical engineer. He was not an instrument maker. And he contacted Dr. Helmholtz, who was the first real scientist in acoustics. He was German. But he was showing on graphs and so on, sound waves and so on, with a feather and ink and so on. So he had gotten some really fundamental understanding of acoustics. And he invented the bass reflex port for the Steinway grand piano. So the holes you see in the iron frame of a Steinway grand piano, they're bass reflex ports, Helmholtz resonators. A lot of people think they were invented by JBL or some of the old American companies. No, they were invented by Dr. Helmholtz for the Steinway grand piano.
Wow.
So the Steinway grand piano was a scientific, mechanical engineering evolution of the piano. And the fact that they took a totally scientific approach to creating a piano was so fascinating, because apparently it was the first musical instrument maker who took science in to help them. And because they did that, they created a piano that would play about 10 decibels louder than any other piano of the time. And that meant that a piano concert would now mean that you could hear the piano among the whole audience. Before the Steinway grand piano, it was only the royalty sitting on the front row who could hear the piano. And the cembalo was still a popular instrument until Steinway came with the piano. But you know, the piano is called the pianoforte, soft, loud, and that's what was so revolutionary about this the Steinway grand piano. You could play very, very soft. You could play very, very loud. So you had the dynamic range. And that was why it became the finest, the most popular piano in the world very, very quickly. So looking at their story with science, hardcore science to improve sound, was exactly what I wanted to do also. But 150 years later. So it was fun to talk about all of this. And even the guys at Steinway didn't really, a lot of them didn't know the story about the science behind the Steinway piano. But when we then look at how the piano is designed, so they had made some fabulous discoveries when they designed the piano in order to reduce the distortion from the strings and all of that. It's an amazing product, even by engineering standards today. You show an engineer what it's made of, how it's done, the thoughts going into it. Most engineers would be flabbergasted still today.
That's a fascinating story.
So we had this whole conversation, and in the heat of the discussion, I said, I'd love to make a Steinway branded speaker system. And my suggestion is, if we can reproduce a Steinway grand piano so that a Steinway pianist and the Steinway tuners can be tricked into thinking they're listening to the actual piano, then I think we should talk business. And that's what I want to do for you. And I want to do it in any room of your choice, not a bathroom, but any normal room. I want to demonstrate we can reproduce a Steinway grand piano. And I'll throw in a symphony orchestra for free. So we had a laugh about that, and we agreed that we would come up with a proposal for a grand speaker system, which then became the Model D.
How long did you give yourself, or how long did you take to produce it?
Well, we'd given ourselves a deadline of about 6 months.
Wow.
But remember, at that time, we already had RoomPerfect more or less working. We had the Class D, not Class D, but the fully digital amplifier technology, which I'll revert to a little bit later. That was always also working. We had brilliant engineers, because we already hired all these engineers to work on RoomPerfect and so on. So we had huge resources to put into the project. So the biggest challenge was actually to make the actual appearance of the product, to make it look good, to make it look classical, not modern, not old-fashioned, but timeless. I decided very early on to go for dipole because it has these inherent advantages, and we had to make a product where you can put it in any room and it'll sound great. You don't need to modify your room. You don't need to think about acoustics. It'll always sound great. So it had to be a dipole. The challenge then was to make a really nice looking design. And we had 3 different design companies from Denmark working on the design. And when we then saw the final proposition from one of the companies. That was 4 days before we had to meet the Steinway people and show them how it would look when it was finalized. The designs we had received from the design companies were horrible. They were disastrous. Imagine a piano that you stand upright with the keys down and the shape of a piano. It was horrible. It was undescribable. It was so ugly that nothing, I'd never seen anything more ugly. But anyway, it was hideous. It was absolutely a disaster. So I was already in the US at that time. A couple of our engineers were there to show the actual physical demo, which would just be made out of MDF and whatever. So we started working on the design. I did the head units. Two of the other guys did the Model D, the speaker design. We all chipped in, and 3 days later, we had the finalized design.
3 days?
3 days.
Wow. And probably 3 nights.
It was full time. But it was, you know, of course, there are tiny little details, but the actual design was bingo in the first go.
Wow.
So that was fun.
And where did this event take place?
That was in New York. And Steinway had picked a room at a hotel nearby Steinway, where we had a space of about 350 square feet or so. Just an ordinary little meeting room. Because I promised them we didn't need a studio we just said it would sound good. And they came in and they listened, and one of the guys was a former studio engineer. And he was the guy who was totally blown away and he took one chair and put himself in the corner of the room and said, bloody hell, he even sounds better here than anything I've ever heard. He was over the moon. The CEO of Steinway was also over the moon. And then he said, Peter, we talked about Steinway, just the name Steinway, but this is so fabulous. It should be called Steinway Sons.
Wow.
And you have to know then that we guard this name with our life. And if we do this, you have to also guard the name with your life. So, yes, sir.
Wow. It's like being knighted and presented with, you know, this very special accolade.
Yeah, it was.
And that must have been you. I mean, when you had that, were you nervous when you played the track, or were you pretty confident?
I was confident. Honestly, I was confident.
And then when you saw the faces, it must have been you must have been on like.
Well, as soon as I saw the very, very positive reaction, I knew this
we've nailed it.
It's going to go well.
Do you remember which track you played?
I played. Oh, I don't remember exactly. I played some, of course, piano pieces.
Mm-hmm.
3 or 4 piano pieces, and I played some orchestral music. I only played classical in the beginning. Then we played also a little bit of modern pop music and so on. But it was mainly classical, and lots of it was piano based.
And to all intents and purposes, the audience were convinced that there's a grand piano in the room.
They could not hear the difference.
Wow.
We had one of the tuners, one of the guys who actually fine-tuned the Steinway pianos. He was over listening, and we asked him, is there anything you would tune differently?
Wow.
And he actually came with a very good comment. He said, honestly, and he closed his eyes, and then he pointed between the speakers. That piano sounds fabulous. The guy who tuned that piano did a fantastic job.
And the rest, as they say, is history.
And by the way, the first, we never did much with the audiophile magazines and so on. But the first time we brought the actual speaker over to New York, we were in the lobby of a club. where they had an oval room, which was a total acoustical disaster. And we invited the guys over from Stereophile to listen to the speakers. And they came, 2 or 3 guys, as far as I recall. And they looked at the speakers and looked at the room and say, yeah, but you're obviously not going to play the speaker in this room. I said, oh, why not? So we played the speaker in that room, and they were blown away, even with absolutely, under normal circumstances, horrible acoustics. And they actually wrote it up in stereo. I think you can still find it on Stereophile, their first experience with the Steinway system, where they do make a point of it that they had not expected me to play the speakers in that room.
And I think this is the it's a very important lesson, because the timing of it, that you'd done the research, you developed the RoomPerfect technology, you hired the best engineers, and so when the challenge came, your immediate response, well, yes, of course we can do it, knowing full well most of the work had already been done, the experimentation had been done, whatever mistakes had been made in the past had now been corrected. So the timing was crucial, but to have that confidence in the product, I think, is extraordinary. And it wasn't blind faith. This was tried and tested scientific theory in practice. So, yeah, let's take, all's good in Houston. Coming on from the brand, and obviously, the brand has gone from strength to strength, and now is very synonymous with a luxury audio brand. Now, I think I have my own understanding of this, but I always wanted to ask you, what's the difference between luxury audio and hi-fi?
I think about it quite a bit, because a lot of the audiophiles in Asia, maybe in particular, they are not really interested in the final perfect sound. They are interested in the journey towards something that may one day end up with something that sounds really wonderful. So they play around with speaker cables and power conditioners and different loudspeakers and different amplifiers and different, all different kinds of nitty-gritty, a new tabletop, a new suspension system for your amplifier, a new suspension system for your cables, all different kinds of things. That really doesn't make a difference. And I think sometimes that these guys would be terrified of getting a system that is just perfect, where they don't have anything they want to change. I think they couldn't sleep at night. Just having to listen to music and nothing else, not to worry about anything that they want to change all the time. So that's, of course, the hyper audiophiles. But what we want to do with our systems is to cater for people who love music, who want to enjoy the music, who doesn't want to have any headaches, where we know that we can set up the system and it's going to sound good in their room without any excuses, without them having to change anything. They don't have to worry about the acoustics. Even though with the Steinway products, of course, we have to make the products with the actual Steinway lacquering, and it becomes expensive. It's costly to make it that way. But because of our technology, I will challenge anybody to set up anything like our S system. If you set up the S system reasonably well, come on with any of these audiophile systems. And, even with all the band-aids you can find in the whole wide world, and 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 years experimenting with the acoustics, I would say good luck, because it's so fundamentally right. That system was reviewed by the Absolute Sound, by the way. And so that's the only Steinway system that was sent to a magazine for review. And I remember the reviewer, he heard it also in an awkward place in Los Angeles, in a hallway where you don't demonstrate audiophile systems. And I sat him in front of the speakers, like 15 feet away from the speakers, and I played some classical music. And I was really interested in how would he react. And I asked him, so what do you think of the system? And his reaction was exactly this. It's awesome. And, you know, most of these reviewers, they always like, oh yeah, but there's a little bit here, a little bit there, and I can hear my this for this. Blah, blah, blah. They always have some complaints. Like you just said, it's awesome. So.
Yes, I mean, obviously, there's a lot of time in the research and development, but my reference to, I guess, saying luxury audio is if you were to Google, you know, $1 million speakers or the most expensive speakers in the world and click Google Images,
Yeah.
the things that you see, in my humble opinion, often look horrendous, like transformers or weird garbage bins, and they look like strange experiments which have come to life. Whereas the aesthetics of Steinway Lyngdorf speakers, I mean, these look splendid, they look gorgeous, they look opulent, they match with the grand designs of a beautiful Steinway Sons grand piano. And I think often if we think where these speakers going, into what sort of homes, into what sort of places these speakers are going to be put at, they're so gorgeous to look at, even when they're not even being played. And I think, in my opinion, that has, you know, a lot to do with luxury audio. You're not just paying for the performance, but come and look at this before you know, there's drama before the performance even begins, and I think that's a privilege.
Yeah, of course, it's. I would say, in a way, it's a little bit easy when we work with Steinway and Sons because a lot of things are kind of given. Mm-hmm. It has to be a design that is everlasting. It can't be a fluke of the day, you know, that today this color is a fashion, or it cannot be a fashion product. It has to be stylish, timeless, aesthetically pleasing. It has to follow function also. So it's a little bit a given that it has to be beautiful, you know. Also because, you know, a Steinway grand piano is beautiful. But you also think it's beautiful because you know how it sounds, what it can do, the artists that you associate with it, and so on. So that's also why we adhere very strongly to the heritage of Steinway and Sons and so
on. And I think exactly the same convincing argument applies to any, not just any luxury brand, but luxury brands which are associated with meticulous craftsmanship and exclusivity, and the love and the passion that goes into it, whether you're talking about Patek Philippe or Rolex or Bugatti or Ferrari or any of these things. The engineering, the craftsmanship, the performance, it's just synonymous with that rather than just a label on a handbag.
Yeah. It's, you know, in a way, I have a little bit of version of talking about luxury, because a Steinway grand piano is not a luxury piano. Mm-hmm. It is just the best possible piano. It is like, it's a Rolls Royce, but there is no Bentley. Mm-hmm. It is just the perfect evolution of design, quality, everything like that. And in a way, of course, it is a luxurious product, but it's not thought of as a luxury product.
I'm glad you've made the distinction. That's a very important distinction. And of course, for people who are discerning, they're more deserving of investing in the brand rather than just getting it for the brand name itself, in which case, I'm sorry, you don't deserve it.
Yeah. And it's also, that's, I've heard from some of these audiophile geeks, especially in Asia, when we presented the Model D speaker system, I thought that's a hefty price. But one of the reviewers said, Peter, it should be twice as expensive. It's not expensive enough. For this quality, it's not expensive enough. Some people will not buy it because it doesn't cost enough money. I said, but we will still sell it at a price where, for that kind of quality and workmanship, the sound quality, everything, it's a good value product still, right? And that's a little bit, in Denmark, we are kind of a little bit, we're not flashy people, I don't know of anybody that drives a Lamborghini in my neighborhood. Right? It really doesn't really happen.
Maybe because you're probably a lot more secure within yourselves.
Yeah, I don't know. But
and now when it comes to innovation, so certainly in the last 2 years, we've seen some a great deal of innovation and new technology come from Steinway Lyngdorf. We've had at least we've had the Model A system. We've seen the marine speaker being launched, a revision of the classic Model C to separate the boundary woofers, and now the world's largest soundbar, most powerful soundbar has been released, the Model S soundbar. It sounds like there's just accelerated growth and innovation, and it's just going faster and faster. Wow, you must be extremely excited, and we're just trying to catch up.
Well, yeah, sometimes. Of course, I try to listen to everything before it's approved. But fortunately, now we have a lot of very, very good engineers in the company. Until 10 years ago, maybe less than 10 years, I wanted to listen to every major product ever before it was released. But now our engineers are so damn good, I don't need to do that anymore.
Wow.
Most of the time I do. For instance, after we had made our Model S system, we had our Model S, we had the Model D. And then we have Model C, which is a little bit of a blend of those two things. And then we always wanted to do a Model B, something that was less expensive than the Model C. And our engineers came, I think, with about 20 different propositions.
Wow, okay.
For a system they thought would be better than the Model S and almost as good as the Model C, but in between price-wise. And I was just going like this every time. And I was frustrated the heck out of them. So I think it took us 5 years.
Wow.
And then we did the Model B, which became a great success. And I don't want to brag about it, but that was actually my idea also, because I said, it has to be a dipole, because then we can place it anywhere. And then I was quite convinced that this shorter, wider format would suit quite a few people. So anyway, I drew up the concept for that on the flight back from Korea to Denmark. And then I did 90% of the actual mechanical design, and our engineers then did the sound and so on. It became a good success.
Wow.
So, yeah.
And I guess obviously I'm sure I can't ask you about trade secrets and what's next, but is there anything that you can hint or tease towards what we expect in the future, in the next sort of 18 months or 24 months?
Honestly, on the technology side, we are very happy with what we have. Now, I didn't talk much about our fully digital amplification technology, but that was also a very interesting story, because that was a few years after we did the first correction system. I get a call from Copenhagen. One of my friends called me and said, I know this engineer who is absolutely brilliant. He's astonishingly bright. And he's come up with an idea to make a fully digital amplifier, which means it's actually not a Class D amplifier. It is just a D to A converter that drives the speaker directly. There was a few people in the US who had been dreaming about products like that. So I was a little bit skeptical because that involves switching at up to 70 volts very, very fast without any noise and so on. That sounds like something that you should probably try to avoid. But I met the guy and he started to explain to me his ideas and so on. And he already had a prototype of a fully digital amplifier, which is the D to A converter driving the speaker directly. And I listened to it, and it was noisy. It was not perfect. But my God, it just had something that didn't sound like an amplifier, but it sounded a lot more like a violin or a cello.
Wow.
Without any of that tonality that you normally hear in an amplifier. So I thought, there's something here missing. There's something that is not there, that is normally there, that I'm absolutely not missing. He's got rid of something eigentone in an amplifier in an interesting way. So I decided to finance a project of developing this technology. And his name is Lars Risbo. And he then developed the technology, and we came out with the Millennium amplifier in 1998, which was 2 times 200 watts. It got the best reviews ever of any amplifier, I think, ever. Fully digital, volume controlled by adjusting the power supply. So many things were so fundamentally right about that design. It had no feedback. And brilliant. It was brilliant. Sounded fantastic. Sounded wonderful. And so I paid for all the patents that Lars was dreaming up in his company. And in the year 2000, Lars sold his company to Texas Instruments. And he became head engineer for the digital amplification and D to A to D converter technology division in Copenhagen, big research center. And he was still a good friend, and I had an agreement with TI that anything that they use in digital amplification and so on, I can use without paying anything in particular for it. And of course, we knew all the engineers that was working for TI, and they helped us with Lyngdorf and with the Steinway products and so on. So even today, we are the only company that is using all the aspects of the fully digital amplifier technology. And it serves us so well in the Steinway systems. As you know, when you set up a Steinway system, you never have to worry about hum, buzz, noise, or anything. It cannot happen. It never happens. And that's due to his brilliant ideas. And this guy is now also partner with me in a new company we founded 8 years ago, where we design Class D amplifiers, loudspeaker drivers, totally a research company called Purify. And he was #1 worldwide on Class D amplification, fully digital amplification. Now he's #1 worldwide on loudspeaker driver design.
Wow.
So he switched, he thought it would be interesting to improve speaker drivers, because now amplifiers are so good, there's no reason to really improve much on that field. So fantastic part of our family story.
So I think the audience should be getting the hint now, the thread that we sort of employ the best and are the best and use the best products and the best innovation. So the results are obviously going to be nothing less than.
Well, yes, and you know, when you have already some of the best engineers in the world in your company, a lot of good engineers find that interesting. And if I have one quality that I can be proud of, I think it is that I want to help finance development if it will result in better sound. So all of our engineers know if they come to me with an idea to make something that will sound better, then I'm saying, you don't have to ask me.
Wow.
Just do it. Show me a budget, yes, but let's do it. For God's sake, let's do it. Because there's nothing more in my, in terms of technological development, of course, there's robots, there's autonomous cars, there's a lot of fantastic technology coming. But what is more beautiful than working on better sound?
Wow.
Making music sound even more beautiful. There's, do I make washing machines? Absolutely not.
It's suddenly much more fun listening to good music than the sound of washing going around.
Yes. And then, of course, when you have brilliant engineers, when you have good core technology, we can achieve so much more when we think about the way we design a speaker driver in combination with how we're going to use it with the Class D amplifier, with the fully digital amplification, with the filtering technology in RoomPerfect, with the crossover technology, with the bass management technology we have. So when we make a let's say a subwoofer mid-high system, where we use RoomPerfect and our bass management technology and so on, we typically cross over at 200 hertz to the woofer or 300 hertz. And what that means is the woofer has to be good. We make good woofers anyway. But when we can run them up all the way to 300 hertz and avoid running the mid-range lower than 200 or 300 hertz, we achieve 10 decibel lower distortion from the mid-range driver. And it costs us nothing, because it's just a question of arranging all the other technologies to handle that situation. So that's also one of the reasons I can say that even when we spend a heck of a lot of money on making the Steinway products look fantastic, we have so much inherent advantage of our way of coordinating all the technologies that we're still fantastic with the sound.
And I think that's an important thing for the audience to understand is it's a system designed, integrated approach. So when people ask, can they just get the Steinway speakers, or can they just get the Steinway amp, or just the woofers? No, what you're investing in is incredible audio performance, which tracks back to the way the whole system is integrated, and each and every level is designed for purpose with that seamless integration for you to enjoy music at that level.
Yeah, you're absolutely right about that. You can compare it to, if you want to have a really, really good car, you don't go down to your local mechanic and ask him to put something together out of a chassis from BMW and engine from Mercedes and a gearbox from GM or whatever. That would not be the best way to get a good performing car. To have the total system integration is a huge advantage. And also the way, for instance, we make our power supplies in all of our products. We design all the power supplies in every single product. And we design them to be 100% immune to any noise coming from the grid. Incredible. Noise coming from the grid cannot enter our system, period. You can have any amount of industrial noise coming on your 220 volts or 110 volts or whatever. It cannot go into your music. We guarantee that it will never, ever happen. It has never, ever happened. It's not something that people can readily see, but just that single fact means cost reduction in the final setup, not to have to worry about this and that and so on. The way the amplifiers are designed, to be immune to back EMF coming from the speakers, to radiation coming on the speaker wires and so on, it cannot create a problem. That due to the way it's designed. We can run 200 meters of digital cable and there will be no noise.
Now, I have to ask, as owner of arguably the finest audio system on the planet, I want to know what toys you've got at home.
Well, I have a home theater.
Of course you
In my
do.
basement.
Tell me about the home theater.
It's an S-based system, S15, left, center, right, and two surrounds. I have to go with the ceiling speakers also. I haven't had time to get it all set up. I use 6 12-inch woofers per channel, which is a bit
Six
overkill.
12-inch woofers.
Yeah, and I cross over 300 hertz. So the tiny little S15s
Mm-hmm.
performs that you expect from a 15-inch system,
Mm-hmm.
because of the technology around it. And I like it to be a fairly simple system because even with 5 speakers, it gives a more immersive sound than a heck of a lot of systems that I've heard with 21 speakers and so on. We sold, by the way, the S15 system, 2-channel system, to one of the engineers at Fraunhofer Institute in Germany. And they were experimenting with 21-channel surround systems. When he heard our S15, his comment was, and I'm quoting him, "Bloody hell, this is more three-dimensional than when we use 21 speakers."
Wow, that's incredible feedback. And I know in one of the videos you did for high end, you were mentioning that in terms of the number of channels, if you can get fantastic sounding audio with just a pair of speakers, and it sounds that good, it'll, as you just pointed out, it's far better getting that system done correctly rather than a mediocre multi-channel system.
There's a tendency to add more and more channels. And that's also why I'm hesitating about having more than 5 channels. And every time I do a demo of my system, I start with some really good classical recordings. And I let people think it's a 5-channel, multi-channel system they're listening to. But it's only 2-channel. And they already think it's a multi-channel system. It's a damn good multi-channel, right?
Wow.
And then we go to multi-channel.
And you're waiting to put some Atmos speakers in.
I will do it. Also, I haven't listened much to Atmos. I think you're absolutely right. It's much better to have 2 channels that are damn good than a whole lot of cheap channels.
And so and the woofers you're using are which ones?
They're the 12-inch Steinway woofers.
This will be the LSR 212s?
212s, yes.
And
so
you've got
3 of those per channel.
So 3 on the left, 3 on the right.
Yes.
Wow, that's and how large is your room roughly?
It is 7.6 meters by 5.6 meters.
Which is a substantially large room.
It's a 550 square foot room.
Wow, which is a big room. Big room. And how many seats have you got in there?
6.
So for the audience, that's a quite a moderate to large cinema, which probably is similar to sort of a double garage space or slightly bigger than that, almost a triple garage space.
Yeah.
And for anyone seeing the Model S15 speakers, they're the size of a cereal packet. And that might blow people's minds in the sense that, some people think they need huge floor standing speakers in a room like that, whereas that's just an extraordinary demonstration in there.
But when you use this higher crossover, of course the S15 is very, very efficient. But when you use a higher crossover, your power response in the room has to have about 6 decibels more in the bass than in the mid-range.
Right.
So the S15 takes only over when it's supposed to be 6 decibels down.
So that's how you do it.
It's 4 times the power.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And it's an efficient speaker.
Incredible. And you're using S15s on the front wall?
Left, center, right, and for the surrounds.
So identical speakers all the way
Yeah.
around.
Yeah.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
Very
I
interesting.
can tell you, I had the engineers from Lyngdorf Studios, probably the best recording studio in Denmark. They were visiting my room at a time when I still had the S15s behind the cloth, so nobody could see the S15s. These studio guys, they have the largest Genelecs in their studio, where the left, center, and right speaker have 15-inch woofers, mid-range tweeter, but two 15-inch woofers in each of the left, center, right speakers. So they came to my listening room and they were blown away. And then I showed them the S15s behind the curtain. And then they said, no way, no way.
That's good fun.
Incredible. And by the way, my son, we were doing a recording with a local band in that studio, and my son was down there. And so we listened to the recording when it was done on this big Genelec system. And my son then, when we went out to the car, he said, Dad, it's going to be fun to listen to at home to hear what it sounds like.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
And apart from the theatre system, I'm presuming you've got at least a pair of floor standing speakers somewhere else.
No, you would be wrong.
Oh, wow. Okay.
In my living room, I have the cheapest Lyngdorf system.
Okay.
And that's a little bit out of principle, because if it's not good enough for me, it's not good enough for our customers.
Wow. There you go.
So that is our MH3, BW3, and 1120 amplifier.
Wow.
And that system, if you set it up properly for the money, it gives you a good hint of what you can hear in a Steinway system.
Wow.
It's not a Steinway system. Absolutely not.
Yeah.
But it has some of the same magic, with the panoramic stereo and the depth and everything like that. The crispness in it, you feel the bass in a different way and all of that.
You're quite right. I've got a very similar setup in my lounge. Again, the MH3s are so discreet; they almost disappear in the room.
Yeah.
But the richness and the warmth, it's a fabulous system.
It is a great system, yeah.
So are you going to be putting a pair of majestic Steinway speakers in anywhere else? And if so, which ones would you choose? I mean, it's your company, you can choose what you want. Which is your favorite floor standing system?
Of the Steinway speakers.
Yeah.
I really like the new Model A.
I think they're fabulous, and they look, they're just awesome. As that guy said,
they look good, and they're warm, and they're gutsy, and
and I think they're very versatile. They're very versatile because they're not, for most living rooms, a pair of Model Ds. You need the room, you need the space. They're very majestic speakers, but I think as an all-round, I think they're my favorite, and I think they're probably the most popular selling Steinway speakers certainly in the UK, and gaining a lot of traction elsewhere. But it's a great system.
Yes.
And just in terms of further innovation, is there anything else that we can expect in the next sort of 12 months or so, or is it all under wraps?
It's all under wraps, and if I were to tell you how to...
Yeah, I can't imagine what would happen next, so we won't go there.
I will receive some free spanking next time I come up to the engineering department.
Can I hazard a guess? Because we can always speculate and guess. So I'm going to make a guess on this podcast. Now, at some point, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some collaboration with a luxury car manufacturer at some point.
We have been approached a few times, and The issue is that there are very few of these famous brands in car audio that are actually much more than just a logo and a faceplate. And I've been, we've been approached by some people that were totally not serious. They said, "Oh, we just use the name, da da da, and we show you what it's going to sound like, and you will get whatever, $5, $10, $15, $50 per car." No, thank you.
Obviously, you don't get it, so no, thank you.
Would I want to do something? Yes, I would want to do something, but it would have to sound absolutely wonderful.
Absolutely.
And if it doesn't sound wonderful, it shouldn't be done.
No, and I think you because we apart from say headphones, or if we have a system at home, most people will spend a lot of time listening to music in their car, particularly long journeys.
Yeah.
I certainly I love listening to chilled house music in the car, particularly for long journeys and things. And listening to a bad system is terrible. And I've actually sometimes chosen cars based on the sound system because they happen to have an upgraded sound system, because I can't stand awful sound systems. I'd much rather not listen to any music. So it'd be very interesting. I would love to see a properly set up Steinway & Sons system in the right car some point in future. It'd be very interesting.
Now with the electric cars, I just bought a BMW i7, and that car is so damn quiet. It's so damn quiet. It's incredibly quiet. And that's where I would love to have a fantastic sound system. It has a BMW system, and as far as I can see, it's a good quality system. But I just don't understand why it's not so that you really, even with all those speakers and so on, there's something in it that is not totally satisfying still. It's a good system.
Yeah.
Actually, one of the best systems I ever had was in my Tesla Model S.
Right. Okay. Well, Elon Musk, congratulations on that one.
But it was a damn good sounding system.
So there you have it. There's a challenge for car manufacturers. If you're worthy of having a Steinway & Sons system, make the correct proposition, and Peter might be persuaded. And then before I let you go, I know you're incredibly busy, and I know you've got your fingers in so many pies, including business and flying and excursions. And in fact, I'm so privileged that I managed to get hold of you. I think it's been almost a year to get hold of you, because he's so busy traveling and all sorts. But when you get time, you've obviously got a home theater. So when you get time to watch TV shows and films and things, are there any favorite things that come to mind, or is there anything that you've been watching recently that you've really enjoyed?
I don't watch much television.
I know. I'm not surprised.
If I have spare time, I prefer to listen to some music. There's actually a new series called Beck, the Swedish series in Swedish, which is there's some good TV sequels that I find enjoyable.
Have you seen anything?
Of course, I have to admit, I saw Breaking Bad.
All right, okay.
And that was good.
You enjoyed that. You'll probably enjoy Ozark. So the sound design team that worked on Breaking Bad also did Ozark. Have you seen any of the Dune films or Maverick or anything?
I saw the last. There's a new Dune film.
There is Dune Part 2. Yes.
Part 2. I haven't seen that one. I saw the first one of the new ones.
Yes.
And I thought it was underwhelming because I saw the first one. What is that? 20 years ago?
Oh yes, in the 80s. Yeah, the David Lynch film.
The David Lynch film.
Yeah.
Was that the 80s?
It was the 80s.
woo. But you know, I thought that was more impressive on the technical side. I thought it was more impressive.
That's fair enough. Have you watched it in your theater?
No.
Okay, so it's worth watching in your
yeah,
theater.
I saw it in my theater. Yes,
Yeah.
I did. But you know, I read the book originally.
Okay.
I read the book 3 or 4 times because I thought it was so brilliant. But I was underwhelmed with the first of the Dune, the new ones.
Maybe the sequel, you might enjoy it more. There's a beautiful sequence played by the legendary Pedro Eustache with a modified duduk in the middle of the film, and I'm convinced it'll sound incredible in your theater.
I have to hear it.
And I think Hans Zimmer, if you eventually watching this podcast, I'll be inviting you on behalf of Peter to go and experience movie in Peter's theater, or at least one of the Steinway showrooms around the world. You can choose whichever one you want to go to, and that invitation is to all the band members for the Hans Zimmer live tour. So there, I've said it. But one recommendation I have for you, Peter, on Netflix, there's an incredible series called Ripley. So you must make a note of Ripley. The cinematography is astounding, but the musical score is wonderful. The sound production is wonderful. It's very film noir, a real good throwback to the sort of Hitchcock style thrillers. But I think you'll really enjoy that. So that's my recommendation to you.
Yeah. That's by the way, that's one thing to anybody that demos a lot of home theaters, I always put an emphasis of showing some good music videos.
Yes.
Really good music videos. And then play some movies with some good soundtracks in the background.
Yeah.
Because when you hear a cello or a symphony orchestra in the background on the Steinway system, it's like, wow.
Yes.
It's like so wonderful. Whereas all these 120 decibel headbanger demos with action movies and so on gives me absolutely nothing.
No, which is why Ripley is exactly your cup of tea, and I look forward to your feedback once you've watched it.
Okay, I'll watch it.
Peter, thank you so much. It's been invigorating, exciting speaking with you. I'm so excited to see what you guys come up with in the next few months.
Me too.
Yes, and it's always a pleasure just seeing you and hearing about you, and just the fact that your love and your passion, your dedication to the pursuit of excellence is just as alive now, if not more, than when you first started this journey. So, congratulations to you and to your family, and we really look forward to seeing what else you come up with in future.
Very good. Okay.
All the very best.
It was my pleasure talking with you. Okay.